Okay, this is the last video for the lab for this week. We're going to be running through steps 5 and 6. So we're going to be creating, pushing the data that we've downloaded into the File Geodatabase. So importing / exporting it into there. And then lastly, we're going to be digitizing some of the data that was in that imagery or the raster data that you have. In my case, it's going to be those building outlines, but it could be anything that you've downloaded. So let's go for it. So we're going to start off in Arcgis Pro, and the first thing we're going to do is load the data that we have downloaded. In this case, my building footprints and my road center lines. We're going to push those into my NOLA L9 geodatabase. And the other thing I want to do when I do this as well is clip some of those features so that they only exist for the area that I really care about, my study area. So the next thing I'm going to do to help me with that is I'm going to right click here and I'm going to create a new data set or a new feature class. And this is going to be my study area. And I can call it just that. And it's going to be a polygon. It doesn't need z-values, and this doesn't need to have any fields or attributes for it. So I'm just going to hit finish and it'll create it. So now that that study area has been created, I'm going to zoom out and actually edit or create a polygon for that study area. And so you can see the study area was already added into my map. Now I'm going to go up to the Edit tab or the Edit ribbon up here. So now that that study area has been created, I'm going to zoom out and actually edit or create a polygon for that study area. And so you can see the study area was already added into my map. Now I'm going to go up to the Edit tab or the Edit ribbon up here. And as Brian mentioned in his other video as well, if you ever want to speed up the performance or speed up the drawing display, you can shut off any number of these layers as well, and that'll help speed things up. So in this case, I'm going to turn off those base maps because we have our image here for reference, which is fine. And I'm going to hit create. And here I get the options for what data I want to edit. And it looks like I have rights or the privileges to edit any of this information. But the data I want to edit in this case is just that study area. So I'm going to click. And it gives me a number of different templates for how I want to draw that shape. And in this case, we want to just go with that first polygon. And now I'm going to click. This is pretty much the same experience as you would have had in ArcGIS Online. But the big difference here is you can see in the icons there, it's actually snapping for me. So if I was doing some really detailed editing, which we'll be doing in a second, I can get my features to kind of click together. And this really helps when you're doing some detailed editing. But in this case, when I'm just trying to draw a simple polygon, I can actually go up here and turn that off. So I just clicked that snapping, and now you won't see those little icons anymore. And so it's not clicking to anything. And then I'm just going to sketch in a rough shape for this, for part of this neighborhood. So there's my shape area, that outline, and I can click here and I can change the symbology for that. And I'd like this to just be an outline and not have a fill. So here I can click an outline, and then after I've selected that, I can then go to the properties and modify the colors for it or change it up to have it look a bit different too. And so instead of that black, I like to use a yellow because it really helps make things pop, especially when there's imagery. I'm going to make a pretty thick outline for the neighborhood and hit apply. And I have this study area selected still, so that's why I'm seeing that blue or the hatch. So I can clear that up here. As I hit clear, now I just have that study area outline. And you can also see some of the streets are drawing on top of it. And we'll see that change as we clip and actually just get the streets and the other features within the study area. You can also drag this and reorder any of these layers at any time too, to kind of change how they're getting drawn. You can see just by doing that, the streets are still drawing on top, or I could take it up here and let that be kind of the main layer that nothing else overlaps. So now let's clip our roads and the building footprints to just include the study area here that we're focused on. So to get all of this data into my File Geodatabase, there's a couple different ways you can do it. I can go to these layers and right click. You can see I can go to data and I could export features. I could export the table. I can push things to different locations. A way I like to do this is to do it just from the catalog. So it doesn't really matter which way you want to do it. There's no right answer here. And so for the houses, I'm going to right click here and then I can go import and import a feature class. And so that's what I'm going to do in this case. And we're doing this for the houses, so I want to do this for those building footprints. And this is a good note actually up here. It's telling me there's pending edits because I made some edits to just that general area. So I'm going to save that so I don't have that dialog anymore. Because occasionally if you have edits open, it can kind of stop other functions or processing. So I'm going to select the features that I'm trying to clip or trying to move over. And I'm going to pick that building footprints. It's going to go in that houses feature data set. And what's the name going to be? I'm going to call this buildings today. And lastly, I'm going to check over here environments. And the reason I'm doing that is I have the ability then to change the extent that the processing is going to happen in. And so what I wanted to do is actually clip the area that is going to be processed. So I can say same as the layer study area, which is kind of a nice shortcut to be able to just grab the buildings that I want as I move them over. And so this is basically called a clip function, but it's kind of a tricky way to do it as I'm just moving that data over into this new data set. Basically doing two things at the same time. Then I'm going to hit run. So you can see now I have the buildings today added in, so that's that data moved over. And it did a fairly good job of clipping it, and I spoke probably incorrectly with it doing a clip because it's basically doing the same extent of that information. So it's not looking at the geography for it and clipping it perfectly, but at least it's giving me a good start for just that study area. So we moved over the buildings. The next we want to move over are the road center lines. And so we can do it in the same way, either right-clicking here or going over to the catalog. So here in my houses, you can see now I've got my two buildings feature classes, and then I'm just going to add the streets right into the root of the geodatabase. And I'm going to click import the feature class. We'll select our streets, those road center lines. I'm just going to call them streets. And I'll do the same kind of lazy clip to get those pulled in. So what's the extent? I want it to be the same as my study area. So that data set just finished as well. So you can see I now have my streets, buildings today. So I can turn off or I can remove those road center lines. I'm going to remove that layer. And I'm also going to remove this layer, this building footprints. And right click and remove. And so the last thing we need to do is take that raster data set and move that into our geodatabase. So to do that, we're going to click for the tools to open up the geoprocessing toolbar. And I'm going to just search across all of the tools. You could also go in and look at all of the toolboxes, which can overwhelm you, or just simply search for what you're trying to do. In this case, let's just search for raster and see what we find. There is a lot of stuff here. So this could get a little overwhelming. So let's get a little more specific. And you can see a lot of raster, raster 2, and oh, it looks like we already found the result we're looking for. So you can see raster 2 geodatabase. Let me type up here and just say raster 2 so we can drill in a little bit further. And here are the number of different data sets we could convert that raster data set into. So in this case, we want to move that raster into our geodatabase. So what raster? Our file we have in the map. And where do we want to place it? We want to put it right in that NOLA lower ninth geodatabase. Again, we could change the environments to clip it. Let's use our study area again. And we'll hit run. So the tool completed running, and for this one we have to actually go and now manually add that into the map. So here's our folder, there's our geodatabase. Let's refresh it. Similar as we can do with folders or files. And then there's that new raster that got added in. So let's turn off our old one. You can see all the layers as they've been closely clipped to the study area, at least that extent of it. And let's add in the clipped raster. So we've now migrated all of our data into this one file geodatabase inside that project folder. So now the nice part about this, and the reason for doing this, is really data management, sharing this information. Or if you're working on a project like this, you know now all of the authoritative project data you have is in one location that again could travel to different places, is in the same coordinate system, and can be used to kind of compare against itself or run analysis. So this is a really important step just to ensure that you have your data in the right locations, and data management is a nice step going forward to keep things cleaned up and organized. So we've got our streets, our houses, our raster data set, and the study area all in this one spot. And so now the last step that we're going to do is actually a process of going through and digitizing some of those buildings that are visible in the imagery. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn off the Buildings Today layer. And we're going to be editing that Buildings 2004 because that's the imagery we are comparing against. And so I'm going to come up here to Edit again, similar as we did this for the study area, hit Create, and then I'm going to select that Buildings 2004. You can see I turned off the Buildings Today just so I don't confuse it, and so I don't have that as an option to edit. Same with streets, let's just turn the layer off since we don't need to see it. And I'm going to select buildings. And again, I have a number of different tool options available to me. So if I zoom in a little bit, I can then just start clicking on the map and creating these building outlines. But the one thing also to be aware of is there's a number of different ways that you can edit and create these features better than just kind of drawing squares one at a time. One of the options here is to just create a rectangle. So if I want to create a rectangle on the map, I could then click, and now draw that to get a rough outline for that building footprint. And one click and I'm done. So that's a pretty nice representation of what that building was. So you saw how easy it was to just create that one square. So there's a couple other options for editing to be aware of too. So if I want to create a polygon, I can also reference other features that have also been created. So I've got snapping turned on again, and I'm going to hit create, and I'm going to go make sure I've got that option selected. And again, it's having me click right to that corner. So here it's saying I'm clicked to that edge. If I get up close enough, now I'm on the vertex, so the corner of that building. And if I click, it'll start me editing in that location. And here again, I just have the option to just start drawing anywhere on the map. But I could also come up and again snap to this corner, this edge, and right click, and I have some options. I could be perpendicular to that edge, parallel, I could have curves, a direction, etc. So there's a lot of options here. And in this case, I want to be perpendicular. So now when I selected that, it's now running me a perfect 90-degree angle off of that edge at whatever length I want. Now I could click. Similarly, I've got kind of free option to put another point anywhere, or I could just click back on that wall again to say parallel. And click. And again, if I want to be parallel to this edge, but also have a perfect corner here, I could right click on this edge and say I want to be perpendicular to it or parallel. And now with my snapping also, it's going to have me snapped right to that wall, and I can double click and finish. So a perfect square aligned right next to that other building. Another quick way to do this is I could just snap a rectangle right on that edge and just start running them down. So I went ahead and edited in and just added a couple additional polygons for this neighborhood to show me where those buildings were. And let's change the symbology for these as well. So let's use a green for that. And we'll hit apply. And one thing we can also do is you could add additional layers into this if you want. And you could modify a number of other properties for this. And if you're looking to modify the transparency, with this one selected, I can come up here to Appearance, and then I can swipe up here to make this one more transparent. So I can see through it a little bit. Let's do the same thing for our buildings today. We'll keep them that same color, but I'll make them a little bit more transparent. It looks like it already took that setting that I put for the other ones. So you can see the buildings today are under those other layer that we created, so the 2004. We drag that up. Let me turn our streets back on. We'll change the symbology for our streets. One important aspect of the streets is there's a lot of data inside of the streets layer. So certainly, whenever you download your vector data sets, look at the different fields and attributes that are in that data so you can see how you might want to symbolize it. So if I right-click Streets and open the attribute table, I have all these different fields, including the street names, etc., that I can use. And so rather than a single symbol for my streets, I'm going to use unique values. Not the name of the street, but there's a field in here called class, which means how big is that street. So here I've got road class, and I'm going to select that. So local, major roads. And for a local road, I can click and modify, one of these, each of these one at a time. And I'm going to make that a bit wider. And for our major road, let's select some of the preset symbology. And I'll do the same thing for minor road and go back and just change that one to match the predefined. Lastly, let me save the project. And we're good to go. So in this last step, we've added in the data into the File Geodatabase. So we have everything in one project location. And then we also went ahead and did some editing. So we started going in and creating features based on the imagery. And do not feel like you need to do imagery or just buildings. Get creative as you want. I'd love to see some different ways that people start to digitize and capture data. Because at the end of the day, if you think of what you could now start to do with this information, if I zoom out here in this project area, I could start to get summaries for the total square footage between 2004 and today. Or if I had data from 2005 and 2007, I could see how that square footage for buildings has changed over time. Or where are there pockets of the city in this neighborhood that are recovering more quickly than others? So there's a lot of really neat analysis I could start to do, even with a data set this simple. Yep, it's going to take a lot of work to manually build this out like I am right now. There's automated ways to do this with AI or machine learning, and we'll start to dive into those as we move further ahead down the weeks. So really excited to see what everyone comes up with, and good luck getting through the lab this week. Thanks.